My name is Shirley Thompson. I'm with the Natural Resources Institute, Environment, Earth and Resources at the University of Manitoba, and I'm delighted to be here virtually. I wish I could have been there in person. My talk today is on First Nation people on Indian Act reserves. So they're called Indian reserves in the legislation, and how they face barriers from different educational access. And just to illustrate this, you can see the youth educational outcomes in First Nations as well as in Inuit, and to a lesser extent, but still existing is poor outcomes compared to non-Indigenous people. So only 49.2% aged 25 to 64 secondary education. When you look at it and look across First Nations, you'll see that they're less likely to complete high school if they live on reserve. And there's lots of reasons for that. In many of the communities I've been in, like Garden Hill and Wasagamag, until recently, they've had to fly out of reserve to get their grade 12. And even so, the offerings are so poor. There's so few teachers, and there's no expert teachers. Like there's not enough funding for a science teacher or a phys ed teacher. So everyone has to be a generalist to teach all the courses. And so you see a much poorer result for people on reserve than off reserve. And it looks like it's about half for attending or completing post-secondary education, particularly for females. And pretty close to, not as bad as half, but 2/3 for high school diplomas. And I'm working at that intersection where I'm trying to get young people into post-secondary education. I have my tax funding for them, and often I can only get them in as mature students. So this is a very busy slide. I borrowed from one of the talks we gave, because every week during COVID, we were doing an Indian Act. In fact, Craig Blacksmith was doing it. I was supporting that only in a supportive role where I hosted the webinar, or in case I've hosted the webinar through my Zoom account. And the Indian Act is something we never learned about in schools, right? So this is back to the education system. And so this was unearthed, and people could ask questions. Weekly we would start at an hour. It never completed by an hour. There was so much to cover and so much to say and so many stories. So in the very left-hand corner, you can read the Indian Act 1876. A person is defined. Well, a person is defined as everyone but an Indian. So that is actually all First Nations people are considered to this day. They are wards of the state. And so, we've been educated about what wards of the state mean. That it actually places a lot of the decision-making power at the federal level for them. And for most things, they're tried under different laws other than for criminal cases. So an example of something that's still current today, so although this is no longer in the version of the Indian Act, it has not been rescinded, which means it still is the underlying philosophy and justification why Indian reserves are owned by the Crown, of Crown land and all land, how that could be empowered to give to the states and taken away, disempowered for First Nation people. So this is maybe random in your consideration of a clause of the Indian Act, the 1985 version, which is the current version, whereby an act of parliament or a provincial legislature, Her Majesty, in right of province, municipal or local authority, or a corporation is empowered to take or to use lands or any interest therein without the consent of the owner. The power may, with the consent of the governor and council and subject to any terms that may be prescribed by the government and council, be exercised in relation to lands in a reserve or any interest therein. So these are different laws that apply to First Nations people on reserve. And this education system has been underfunded. And of course, that depends where you compare it to, right? What percentage it is, whether it's half, whether it's, because Quebec has the best funding for education. And so it depends whether you compare it to that or the whatever provincial body funding per student when you look at per capita funding. And the other aspect is there's a lot of different aspects about roll call and how they underestimate the number of students. I'm going to talk about a training program that's presently occurring in York Landing. And this is working with as a post-secondary where the students are going to University of Manitoba. We apply with them. We pay their tuition, and there is very little funding for education in communities for post-secondary. So it's necessary also because most students, this is a fly-in community. It's a remote community where the ferry, they have a ferry, but it didn't work one year, last year, and most of last year. And this year, it looks like the water levels are too low and it won't be working again. But there's always issues of whether there's a captain or the boat breaking down, etc. So this is the market line where, for building materials, we need to get building materials up there through the ferry or through the winter road. And the winter road time span is decreasing. So York Landing is maybe 3 hours from Thompson, 2.5 hours from Thompson, and in northern Manitoba. So the goal of the Wikuan training program is to provide year-round building and apprenticeship opportunities for youth within the community, to construct homes for future generations, and to provide a post-secondary partnership program targeted at learning through hands-on practical training. So people take courses at the University of Manitoba, environment courses, environmental design courses, which are really focused on visual design rather than considering the built environment and looking at blueprints or computer-aided design. So we take it through participatory design, looking at housing and how does housing have to change to be more functional and work for the community and to reflect their environment, but also to reflect their values. We have looked at forest management. We have cut trees from the local woods. In this case, we've done that with the Boreal Home Builders in Wasagamak and Garden Hill, where 70 students were trained. For York Landing, we're looking at rock because it's on a smaller peninsula and farther north where the trees really are limited in size and in number. So, and because York Landing was displaced from York Factory by government, it was a forced displacement. They don't have a large territory around that they could draw from. So instead of that, we're looking at stone buildings, which is said to have been the reason France rebuilt so quickly after the war, is building with stone as a structural stone element, constructing that and the exchange. So I'm going to show you a little video, and this video helped our project get 8.4 million for the region for a trades education center. So that trades education center will include carpentry and where we can build houses inside the building, at least most of it, at the parts. It will also include kitchen skills, so culinary arts, and motor. And anyways, so that's one for 8.4 million. A dormitory, because it's going to be a regional for the Swampy Cree, so the Innu, with the region, and 3 prototype houses for sale. So we'll start that video and show you what was proposed. And this was part of a very long proposal, and it was the Dragon's Den, a competition for the CMHC Rapid Housing Program, Supply Challenge, and a Housing Supply Challenge. And it was very competitive and very fast turnaround, where we have to build all of that without, with winter road issues, with the lack of a ferry, within a year. So it really pushes the imagination and also creates all sorts of stress and potentials for failure. Oops, so that did not play. Let's try again. There you go.
Our youth. Wickiwan Indigenous youth with experts and researchers are transforming housing and education in our Cree homelands. Northern Manitoba is rising up to resolve the colonial housing crisis. Indigenous youth from all communities up north unite, innovate, and design to build sufficient quality homes on native land. Community-led applied education and research is building a workforce for a better future at York Landing and the upcoming Postsecondary Urban Reserve.
And I even went to work for UMM to develop I'd say a curriculum for res seal. I had to show them literally how to build a house. So what we did was we had a class in the morning, and whatever we worked on, say foundation and footings, we'd have a class on that, and then we'd go out and do it. That's how they learned. And that's how they retained all the information. They didn't learn by theory, they learned by showing them how to do it. I think the U of M has put in a lot of work and time and effort to make this a reality for us, and we hope that they can make a bigger change for us when the Postsecondary project starts and actually bring the university to us up north so we can train for those engineering and all the higher professional jobs out there.
And wherever. Right now I'm in the Home Builders program. I recently started this course with the University of Manitoba, and so far it seems like it's a fun experience, and I'm really excited to continue this and see what I can learn.
My name is Lucas from York Landing. I'm in the Home Builders program. It's fun, learn about the environment and building a house. Just doing framing and just doing the Tyvek and the siding now, roofing.
Oh, sorry. I know there's people raising hands, so I pressed that, and I shouldn't have.
Yeah, it's a neat design. Never worked with it before.
It has a neat design where there's about, I think, 3 feet of space between both roofs. So when the sun's rising, you'll have a nice array of natural sunlight going to your house right in the living room and your kitchen. The north side doesn't have any windows, but every other side does. And it has a great view from the tree line to the lake to the rest of the community.
These helical piles compared to concrete foundations reduce cost, time, and risks, from melting permafrost and muskeg.
Now the differences are a little less obviously in the beginning of the freezing season and in the end, but you see that in midwinter, where you had spikes over 30 years, it went really down low. Those spikes are going up now. So there's actually quite a difference between the early, or let's say 50s to 80s and 90s to 2020.
So one ground guy checks out the measurement and makes sure it's going down. The second ground guy checks for the pressure. It must not be over 1,500 psi.
So it was a great opportunity to work with Dr. Thompson and Chief Wastesekut in Wasagama and Garden. And this program graduated 70 youths with different certificates in carpentry, forestry, sawmilling. After evaluating the comments, the response from the students from the program, it showed that there was a need to upscale this kind of program across different indigenous communities. We started with York Factory First Nation joining the Minobi Mazime partnership. This works. This really works. I hope to see it in a lot more communities, even down south. Our First Nations are struggling with a lot of things: education, health, infrastructure, everything, basically. Nobody comes to our communities because a lot of us don't want to leave. So we have to look at different ways to educate our people. And one of the ways that we're doing programs with Shirley Thompson.
What you need here for your kids to stay here?
Better education.
Grade 12. Yeah, grade 12. They only go up to grade 10 here, I think. 10 or 9.
Some places 9.
Yeah.
Would you like to see apprenticeship for them?
Yeah.
So this is the workshop, and some things you have to consider in your design is, do you want access to the outside? Like if you were living here, would you want to go through the workshop every time you wanted to go out? Or would you want direct access outside, right? So that's some of the things to think about. We have Macy Behrens, and she's in the architect program for interior design. So she's working with computer-aided design. Take these secans, which is here and here. So this is 2, and this is another 2. We're getting 4 altogether. So far 2 have arrived, right? You've seen them.
This winter, we will design and build the apprenticeship level Wickawen workshop to train Indigenous youth from many northern communities and build houses all year round. Wickawen will house the many homeless and underhoused students in a family dormitory. Some students have 6 children and need support and a home, whether from York Factory First Nation or other northern communities. The residents will include an innovation classroom, computer room, commercial kitchen, and circle room, with an elder in residence supervising. Also in phase 1, we will evaluate the 1-bedroom prototype to improve future designs. In the spring, phase 2 will start by designing prototypes, 3 and 4 bedroom homes with local resources and U of M partners who have researched appropriate materials and designs. Students and apprentices with expert tradespeople supervising will build these prototypes. By the 3rd phase, we've learned so much. We can design and build an improved 2-bedroom prototype targeting net zero energy and mainly local materials. This 3rd phase will train enough highly skilled tradespeople to fully realize the potential of Pacifico.
And it's about Pacifico development. This development represents $279 million of mixed-use development. There will be 384 units for housing, different types of housing. There will be a hotel conference center, government institution buildings. There will be commercial space. The total land mass is 89.3 acres.
There is hope, and we will. Pacifico. That means right. Thank you.
So here is an education program that's focused on community-led solutions to problems. And so you can see that there's lots of inadequate housing, and it's highest on reserve, I should say. And it's gotten a little bit better in 2021, but at 40%, that's horrible. And includes a lot of people in inadequate housing. It's worse it's around 40 to 50%. It's worse in Manitoba, but it's the worst situation for youth. So youth are highly at risk for inadequate housing, and inadequate housing is when major repairs are needed. So it doesn't have running water, or it's been flooded and there's mold. Unsuitable is when it's overcrowded. And you can see that for youth in Canada and at higher rates in Manitoba, there's lots of overcrowded housing. When you look at all the overcrowding aspects, which is otherwise known as unsuitable, you can see it's worse for youth and highest across Canada, but even higher for Manitoba. The theory of change, and this is my concluding slide because I'm probably out of time, is a Wicklin, is a community-led home building project-based education will increase education attainment, employability skills, enhance economic status, create sustainable community development and housing. And it's both a dual strategy for education disparities and housing challenges. And this model, is a regional model. It's being done at York Landing, having a trade center, but it's looking regionally, and it could be done in other places. So thank you.